Hello, my name is Susan Barreto. I'm editor of Alternatives Watch, which is a news and data resource exclusively on the alternative investment industry. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual influencers panel. And here they are, the virtual influencers. Immediately to my right, I have Cynthia DiBartolo of Rise Financial Services, I should say CEO of Rise Financial Services and Rise Prime. And immediately to her right, we have Lilly Knight, who is Managing Director at K2 Advisors, which is a leading global fund-to-funds firm. And immediately to her right, we have Summer Zhao, who is with Lafayette College, and her work is with the endowment as investment director. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today. We're going to have a fun time, I think. So just to kick things off here, I just thought maybe I would have each of you speak a little bit about, whether you think remote due diligence is here to stay. Are we all going to ditch the Zoom eventually? What's going on? I guess we can start off with you, Cynthia.
In the alternative space in particular, I think it was a long time coming to see much more integration and use of technology, virtual cap introduction. I don't think it's going to leave because it is an incredibly efficient way to scale. If we actually look at the historical ways that managers tried to raise capital, it was extremely time-consuming and very costly. They had to see hundreds and hundreds of allocators and investors hoping that a handful of them would be appropriate and suitable targets for their particular strategy. And far too often, the truth of the matter is great managers run out of runway waiting for that AUM. The costs just exceed it. So when you go to an environment where you're leveraging technology, you absolutely propel their chances of success and being sustainable.
So that's the manager's perspective. How about on the investor side, Lilly?
Yeah, that's interesting. So when we arrived home in COVID to lockdown and we figured out that we were going to be there for an extended period of time, we had to kind of think about what to do to meet the managers. So we had the virtual cap intro events, and those were great for this canvassing, the continued canvassing of the universe. However, when it was time to come to hiring a manager, it was really important to figure out what we were going to do. And for a little while, we stopped our hiring process in a way. We continued with managers who we knew at the time, but we put a pause to say, what do we have to change in the process? We had so many things that were done face to face, whether it was from a research perspective or ODD perspective, all these things that we did face to face. And when we saw the FDA opening up and approving drugs, we said, if they can approve drugs, we can approve managers. And so it just took a little bit of time for us to get there. And we just spent much more time on Zoom, like you said, a lot more calls, a lot more data rooms. The technology made it possible. And so I think it is here to stay, but there'll be a little bit of a balance between where we were, which was a lot of face-to-face time, and where we are today, which is a lot less face-to-face. I think we'll get somewhere in the middle for both cap intro and for the research process.
Okay. What do you think, Summer?
Yeah, I would agree on that. I think when pandemic first started, everyone was kind of not knowing what to do, and we all had to adapt to it. And we learned how to do due diligence on Zoom, how to make a decision without meeting the manager. I would say it definitely takes some time. And at the beginning, as Lilly said, we didn't even make any investment for a short period of time because we didn't know, should we make decisions, should we wait? And I think, when I was talking with my peers, a lot of them were on the same page, and they were not comfortable making a new commitment to a manager they never met before, or only met on Zoom. So we were the same. So we only made re-ups. We made commitment to manager we met in the past. So that was the kind of the beginning stage. As we all get more comfortable with Zoom, and we adapt our process to do more extensive reference calls and to have more back and forth with the managers, we changes our investment process to adapt to it. And now we were like, okay, we can get back to the road again. We can meet in person again. We definitely will continue Zoom because it's very time and resources efficient, benefited all of us, and we'll continue that. But I think in person is coming back. We are going to have a good mix of those two.
It's interesting that it's this whole adaptation, and it's a sort of a work in progress is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Guys, yeah. So I'm kind of wondering too, since we're talking about trailblazers and legacy makers today, does remote due diligence, has it been helpful to women in the industry on both sides? Anyone can take that.
I would say absolutely, and I'll tie it to remote due diligence. Everything remote has helped, I think, the women, whether it's flexible work time, whether you work early in the morning or late at night, or whether you're working at home 3 days a week, or some combination thereof. I think it's helped women, you know, from that perspective. And then in the due diligence process, I think it is. If you're not on having to be on a plane, you know, we traveled, we used to add up our travel days, and you know, it was 20% of our time between just doing due diligence and client work. And that's a lot of time to be on the road, and it is global. And so to take that back and put some of the back in the office is really helpful.
And when you look at the women are part of a disadvantaged group, minorities are part of a disadvantaged group. We look at emerging managers as a whole. There are far too many of them failing on every year. 750 to 1,000 fail, 750 to 1,000 roll in. Yeah. So it's a net sum zero game. And that's something wrong with that, because we're losing great managers, not because their strategies aren't excellent and not because they're not great managers. The cost of the business is exceeding what they can generate from their AUM and grow that in order to offset the expenses. So when you go to a virtual environment, whether it's for due diligence or with respect to being able to have reach globally, like on our platform that we developed a strategic, mission-driven mindset that we would create the first diversity prime broker in the country. So we could recognize, owned and operated by women, so we could provide the resources to support these individuals, and then augmented that with a patented virtual cap introduction technology that gives them access to 5,000 allocators. And so think about their chance of success increasing, right? And that's true democratization of capital.
And again, this helps lower the cost for these smaller managers, but you can almost say this the same for smaller investment teams too, right? I mean, Summer, maybe you can talk a little bit about what your experience has been, and maybe even a little bit about IADEI too, that group.
Yeah, sure. So, so first of all, I work at a very diverse team, and 80% of our team are diverse hire. Our most recent hire was a white male, and he actually brings diversity to our team. And so our team, everyone was very supportive because we all understand each other's background, and we try to be very supportive. And everyone has kids, and we all understand the work-life balance. So yeah, it's fantastic to work with such a great team. And so yeah, I would say on the IADI part, because DEI is such a thing from the bottom of our heart, at least from my entire team. And we really focus, I mean, we started to pay attention to this from a long time ago. And a lot of our peers, they talk about this as well. And I really think, I mean, it's very important for bigger companies to care about DEI, to bring diversity to their team, because the more diverse a bigger company is, eventually there will be more diverse firms, right? Because more diverse people become the senior member of a bigger firm, and then they will eventually spin out to launch their own firms. And with that kind of phenomenon we saw, and we were trying to support a lot. We tried to talk with our managers, the GPs we hire, and just understand how they will try to give equal opportunity to the diverse hires. Not only hire diverse people, but also how do you provide them with enough trainings, provide them with equal development opportunities to eventually promote them to the senior group. And so we had these conversations with our managers, and also a lot of our peers. They form kind of like a group of organization called IADEI. And what they do is fantastic. They bring on a lot of diverse managers to present in front of as allocators. And IAD is a group of a lot of endowment foundations, and they bring on these managers on a regular basis. Basically,
this is all virtual too.
It's all virtual, yeah. And they try to set it at a lunchtime, so typically you don't have a meeting on lunchtime, so you can just sit there and then have your lunch and then listen to the presentation. And on top of that, they also have a shared database. You can just go in and do a search, which is fantastic. And if you want to contact a certain manager, you can just ask them for emails or for presentation, etc. So it comes very convenient, yeah.
And it's crowdsourced, which is great because getting that list of managers is just sometimes having the list. Of being saying, where can I start? And so the list that they've made available, everyone is always adding to it. So if you meet people, it's wonderful. Like it's a great starting point for people.
Yeah. And you know, while we're talking about some ideas and what has worked during the pandemic, we would be remiss if we didn't look at what hasn't worked. And I mean, technology is great, but it has its pitfalls too. I don't know if anyone has some stories from the field they want to share.
Well, I think you have to be very prepared for these meetings, as if you were no different than boarding a plane to go visit a client. I think what is disappointing when you're using technology and you go into the meeting and you find the other person is not focused, arrives late, isn't even dressed appropriately, whether that's a shave, a shower, whatever. I mean, you're sitting there going, do they really want to be a part of this? Are they focused on what I'm saying, or are they just checking the box that they did this meeting today? And I think if people embrace the technology and the virtual meetings with the same decorum and respect that they do face-to-face meetings, I think it would elevate much of what we've seen.
Good insight there. Definitely.
I think a lot of people are also, just like you said, as they're doing the calls, they're not present because they are checking email, they're doing 100 other things. But even coming back to the office, we're finding that we are getting people dialing into meetings instead of going into conference rooms. And it's incredibly frustrating because you know that they're not listening also when that's happening. So we're really trying to pull people back into the conference rooms where we would sit across from one another, look at each other, and be fully present. Now, you may be checking your phone or looking at, spacing out a little bit, but you were present in the full meeting where, I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks is a lot of meetings, the other people are just not connecting or listening.
Yeah, I would add to that. So from an investment perspective, I think I really missed the in-person part because you get to know a person in an informal format, and a lot of time it's easier to build trust when you actually meet in person and have chit-chats about something, about your family, etc. So you learned a lot about a person when you have these informal conversations. And also, I miss the in-person AGMs. And it's not only about learning the strategy from a GP, but also to network with the peers, because a lot of good ideas are actually sparked from this type of conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Any interesting horror stories? Anybody calling you from a gym or or the local bar or anything like that?
Usually in the car. You hear blinkers a lot. I hear blinkers in the background very frequently.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
You would not tell the managers to do that.
I just think it takes a little bit of preparation. First of all the technology isn't identical. You can be given an invitation for Zoom or Teams or WebEx or something else, and I got to tell you, technology is not my forte. I'm lucky I know how to plug something in, but you do need to spend a little time and look at the technology and see it before launching it, right? see whether or not there's a place for you to put your name and your company or your picture. And just those, when I get in on a meeting and I see somebody's taken that time, it speaks really well of them, that I think that they're very comfortable in this setting.
Okay.
Because they've taken a little bit of time to navigate the technology. You might want to actually share a screen. You might want to be able to put some of your data up. But if you're kind of lost in the technology yourself, you're not going to be able to use it effectively.
Mm-hmm. Do they ever do a practice run with you? Is that something you thought about?
I will do a practice run not with the allocator,
right.
but I will do it with the manager.
Okay.
And even myself, for any point of business, I will make someone on my team do a practice with me, just so I can be comfortable with all of it.
Good new life advice. Practice before Zoom. And just before we kind of wind down here, is there any element of, we're going into year 3 of this pandemic, and we're kind of doing these weird hybrid events, and we've talked about here are some events that we might be going to in the coming months, but what does it look like going forward? I mean, let's say Zoom will still be on there, maybe not as much. I mean, are business cards going the way of the dodo? What's happening, do you think, going forward?
I think it's going to be a hybrid.
Yeah.
I think it's never going away. I think it's going to be so efficient to scale. You will then have face-to-face meetings after the Zoom, after you've vetted. Think of it as you go in for your first internship for Goldman Sachs, right? You go through different levels before you get to Super Day, okay? So think of the meeting now at the allocator as your Super Day, right? Yeah. There's a lot they can do before that. And the beauty is you have saved both the manager and the allocator an incredible amount of time. You as the manager, truthfully, you have to manage your budget very carefully. So you want to make sure when you're going to expend your CapEx in terms of marketing dollars to get on a plane and hotel, and that you really have a pretty good chance of closing with the allocator.
Anything to
I
add?
think it's going to be great for younger people also. I think younger people, because of the technology, we do so many client meetings in a conference room that's very formal. You don't want too many people on one side of the table.
Right.
Now that with dialing in, they can dial in and be a quiet observer and learn what the clients are asking, what their needs are. So their ability to get trained up. They can also go to a CAP intro event virtually first. Just listen to listen quietly first, and then maybe go to a face-to-face one and start networking. So it gives some younger people, access to the industry and much more insight to what used to happen a lot behind closed doors, or was only reserved for senior people. So I think some of the younger people coming in.
The transparency,
right?
They have to be a willing learner.
Yeah, and they're going to come up so much faster than we did, I think.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Summer, how does the investment process change going forward?
Yeah, I would say we definitely adapt to it, and I think going forward we will definitely keep Zoom, keep the virtual meeting, because as I said, it's so time and resources efficient, and we can have a lot of Zoom meetings up front before kind of the Super Day, and I definitely feel like he's going to stay here. Yeah.
Okay. Any other parting words of wisdom to young emerging managers, diverse managers today?
I think the key to much of their success and longevity is grit. I do not think it is necessarily the talent itself. I don't think it's necessarily the list of degrees they hold from higher education. I believe for women and people of color who are managers, there's nothing more important than resilience. That R factor is what will carry them. They have to be able to stick with it, pivot quickly, constantly navigate. In life we have to navigate, right? We let our cars navigate us, but somehow when it comes to our own lives, we don't really navigate well, right? So we have to really be resilient and gritty in terms of that. And I think that is the key to much of their success.
The word of the year, words of the year, resilience and grit.
Resilience.
Yeah, good one. Gosh, you know, I think for an industry, we need to kind of broaden our definition of what is success for women-owned and operated firms. I also think it's important to broaden that definition to include larger firms that may have co-PMs, may have senior analysts, that may have CFOs, COOs, top roles, to limit our definition of success in our industry as only one of the definitions. You know, we get the questionnaires, you know, how many women-owned or women PM. Those are kind of the two definitions. I hope people can broaden that out, because there are firms that do a lot for women who just may not have the sole PM. You know, I don't want to eliminate that, but want to make sure that we
maybe more of the research team.
Research, operations, CFO, counsel. There's a lot of different opportunities. You know, basically organizations that will support a diverse population.
Right. What's they can all have impact.
Yeah.
Right. But
exactly.
it has to be intentional.
Exactly. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Summer?
I think we started to hear more and more about DEI, so I think there are definitely more support from our industry as a whole, as people are more aware of this kind of issue. And right now there are a lot of support, I mean, the diverse manager can actually find, and I just hope they can use all those resources that we can provide them with, and so I think we are in the right direction.
Excellent. Well, thank you, ladies, for coming out today and joining in person. Yeah. It's kind of nice to see you all.
Yeah, it's great.
And please join me in thanking the panel today.
Thanks for having us.